You know, when you're dealing with those tunnels, you never knew for sure what you would run into. You might run into a VC, yes, but you might also run in, they had cobras that they'd tie in there. You had those bamboo bifers in there. I'd shot bats off ceilings. They had these the weirdest looking spiders and stuff in there that I've ever seen in my life. I mean, they were like, they'd stick to the walls and you'd sort of go by them, but you're not going to mess with them. You don't even know what they are.
That's Hap Culp. He served as one of the early leaders of the 1st Infantry Division's team of tunnel explorers, known as Tunnel Rats. The book, The Tunnels of Cu Chi, a harrowing account of America's tunnel rats in the underground battlefields of Vietnam, describes the tunnels this way. The underground tunnels of Cu Chi were the most complex part of a network that, at the height of the Vietnam War in the mid-60s, stretched from the gates of Saigon to the border with Cambodia. There were hundreds of kilometers of tunnels connecting villages, districts, and even provinces. They held living areas, storage depots, ordnance factories, hospitals, headquarters, and almost every other facility that was necessary to the pursuit of the war by South Vietnam's communists and that could be accommodated below ground. In the last episode, Tunnel Rats Part 1, we introduced you to Hap and the other tunnel rats I met at a recent reunion, including Job Gonzalez.
You get several levels under, so you go down 5 feet or so, go over maybe 20 feet, go down, go to the right, go to the left, go down again.
Gary Oatman.
My team, we didn't throw anything in the tunnel. We went in the tunnel. We searched them first, and then we blew them up, which was a little more dangerous thing, you know.
And Pete Schultz.
I'd roll the sleeves of my shirt all the way up so the hairs on my arms would stand up and I could feel any tripwires because you couldn't see them.
If you haven't listened to episode 53 yet, I recommend you stop here and go check that out because it provides some important context about the enemy's use of tunnels and the Army's attempts to neutralize them. In today's episode, we'll zoom in on the personal experiences of these men inside the tunnels. Stick around. This is episode 54, Tunnel Rats, Part 2. This episode contains vivid descriptions of combat, including grievous injury and death. It may not be appropriate for younger or more sensitive listeners. For 3 weeks, in January of 1967, American forces mounted their largest ground operation of the Vietnam War. Operation Cedar Falls was a massive search and destroy mission designed to wipe out the Iron Triangle, a major stronghold of the Viet Cong northwest of Saigon. It was during Operation Cedar Falls that American troops were forced to deal with the VC's vast complexes of underground tunnels in the area. Here's another excerpt from the book, The Tunnels of Cu Chi. By the time of Cedar Falls, the tunnel rats in various units were refining techniques of exploration and destruction. The problem in that operation was that because the tunnels were discovered so often, too many untrained and inexperienced men went underground. Consequently, there were mishaps that resulted in non-combat deaths. A private in the 4th Battalion of the 503rd Infantry Regiment, for example, suffocated to death on 22 January because an earlier grenade explosion had burned up all the oxygen in a tunnel. Several ad hoc tunnel rats lost their bearings and came up to the surface completely lost. On one occasion, 2 separate tunnel teams were exploring the same system independently, and only good luck prevented their shooting at each other underground. It was in the wake of Operation Cedar Falls that tunnel rat duty in the Big Red 1 was transferred to the 1st Engineer Battalion, where men began to specialize in it. They quickly evolved into a very tight-knit and elite group, so much so that they had their own unofficial insignia made. It featured a gray rat holding a pistol in one hand and a flashlight in the other. Known officially as the Diehard Tunnel Rats, their motto was the Latinized phrase, non gratum annus rodentum, meaning not worth a rat's ass. Phil Hogue spent more than 30 years in the Army, including deployments in Korea and in Vietnam, where he served as the executive officer of the 1st Engineer Battalion.
They were all volunteers. They were a very unique group of people. They were probably the most courageous soldiers I ever served with.
Phil isn't the only one who viewed the tunnel rats as unique. General Bernard Rogers, who was an assistant commander of the Big Red 1, described the tunnel rat this way. Hot, dirty, and gasping for breath, he squeezed his body through narrow and shallow openings on all fours, never knowing whether the tunnel might collapse behind him or what he might find ahead around the next turn, and sensing the jolt of adrenaline at every sound. Surely, this modern combat spelunker is a special breed. The tunnel rats quickly developed their own mystique, which a certain breed of soldier found irresistible. Terry Huser led a platoon of combat engineers in the same battalion.
I had a couple of my guys say, I want to be a tunnel rat. And you had to be in country like 6 months before you could be a tunnel rat. They wanted you to get used to what the country was and everything and what they were doing. These are some of the finest people I've ever met. Some of the bravest people I've ever met.
Leading the group were lieutenants and sergeants who got dirty just like everybody else, and that was by design. Here's Phil Hogue again.
The leadership had to be extremely, extremely good. And by that, I mean the leader had to be in front of these men. They couldn't lead from behind. They had to be the expert. And Sergeant Batten was truly the expert, truly the one that they would follow. Lieutenant Gary Oatman was another, and later Lieutenant Culp. But selecting the lieutenant and selecting the sergeants for that kind of experience was extremely difficult.
I met several men at the Tunnel Rats reunion at the College of the Ozarks, but there were 4 who were treated with an extra measure of respect by the other attendees, the 4 who were referred to as the true Tunnel Rats. They are Job Gonzalez, Pete Schultz, Gary Oatman, and Hap Culp. After a short break, we'll hear personal stories from each of them. Stick around. The Registry is an online community created by VVMF that connects veterans of the Vietnam War era with each other. By signing up for the Registry, you can upload and share stories and images, connect with others who served during the Vietnam era, and connect your service with people you knew whose names are now on the wall. Join the community and preserve your legacy or a family member's by signing up today at vvmf.org/registry.
Hi, I'm Ann Margaret. I went to Vietnam to entertain the troops in 1966 and 1968. My guys, my gentlemen, if you lived through the Vietnam War era, you know the impact that the war had. But today, we are in danger of history being lost. Current generations know very little about the war or the people who served. As more of our Vietnam vets pass away each day, their stories are being lost to history. Together, we can change that. The Vietnam Veterans Memorial Fund is the organization that built the wall. It works to ensure that future generations will understand the war's impact. Let's help keep the promise that the wall was built on. Never forget. Visit vvmf.org to find out how you can get involved.
On Veterans Day 1996, VVMF unveiled an exact replica of the wall that could be packed into an 18-wheeler and hauled to cities and towns all across America. Since then, the wall that heals has been displayed in nearly 700 communities throughout the nation, spreading the healing legacy of the Vietnam Veterans Memorial to millions of visitors. If you want to know more about this traveling exhibit and the impact it can have on a community, check out episode 15 of this podcast. The Wall That Heals and the mobile education center that travels with it will be in Kalispell, Montana, June 22 through 25, and Meridian, Idaho, June 29 through July 2. To see the rest of this year's tour schedule and to learn how you can bring the wall that heals to your town, visit vvmf.org.
You went down in a tunnel. You didn't know if you were coming back.
At 6'1" and 164 pounds, Pete Schultz didn't quite fit the typical profile of a tunnel rat. But after training with Robert Batten, who was being shipped home after 3 consecutive tours, Pete took over as the team's NCO in charge.
You know, the unknown is a terrible thing. You didn't know if you were going to get bit by a snake. You didn't know if you were going to see a VC around the corner. You didn't know what. I mean, I used to go down in a tunnel and you could hear, and what it was the VC had jammed bamboo vipers into the roof of the tunnel so that when you'd crawl by, you know, you'd get bit in the back. I mean, they set booby traps on booby traps on booby traps. It was incredible. You'd be crawling along and all of a sudden the floor would feel shaky. There was a punji pit there. You'd have to go all the way around. I have to get up against the side and move around. Then, it was business as usual, clear tunnels. There were some of them I couldn't get in because I was so big, but there were some that I could stand up and walk in and couldn't touch the sides. They were big.
What was it that made them able to hold up structurally? Was it because they were clay? It was the
type of ground they were dug in. Mm. It was a laterite clay mixture. Laterite is a real fine rock. And it's almost like sandstone. Mm-hmm. But it's not sandstone because you can dig it. Mm. Mm. That's where the clay comes in, mm-hmm. and you can mold it. And it was all arched. And I mean, incredible, just incredible, the way they dug this stuff. Very few cave-ins. Just their architecture for the hospital. All right, we blew it up, but they had rooms that were wide enough I could stand up in there and I couldn't touch the walls. No center structural supports whatsoever. Now, how they mounted those lights, they didn't have stands for them. So, but they had lights, they had generators, they had everything down there that a normal hospital would have, including ventilation. Mm-hmm.
And how far below the surface are we talking about?
Well, this was 3 stories below.
Oh my God. Pete, what was the most surprising thing you ever found in a tunnel?
Surprising?
Yeah.
A doctor.
A doctor.
Doctor. And I tried to cut her throat. I'd shot every bullet I had, so I didn't have any more ammunition. I chased her through a tunnel and her hair was running back, and I tried grabbing her hair a couple times, and I ran into a wall. Because now you got to remember, there's no light. And it's in the book called The Tunnels of Ku Chi. And she said, the largest man I have ever seen chased me through a tunnel, wanting to kill me. And that was me.
How do you know she was a doctor?
I didn't.
You didn't know. You found out later.
I found out later, and I read the book.
So had you known she was a doctor, you probably wouldn't.
I would have killed her anyway, because she was underground, and they are absolute enemies. Mm-hmm. And she was a fully functioning person.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How many times do you think you went down?
In tunnels?
Yeah. Roughly.
Every day.
Every day for how long?
4 months. I was only a tunnel rat for 6 months. And I spent 2 years in Nam.
Exploring tunnels was highly dangerous work in the best of circumstances, but the threat of running into an enemy who felt cornered raised the stakes considerably. It was Sergeant Robert Batten who developed the procedures and techniques that would be widely adopted by the tunnel rats of the 1st Engineering Battalion of the Big Red One. Job Gonzalez was one of the tunnel rats who learned from and served with Batten directly.
I pretty much know the outcome. If I do it correctly, my mindset was more that the more I listened to Batten, that the better I felt about who was going to come out on top.
So how long did you have to train with Batten before you put it into action?
I think about a week.
A week?
Yeah.
Okay.
You got to think that most of the tunnels we went into, the infantry had been there. So if if you discovered a tunnel, most of the VC did not want to fight you. They didn't want to come at you. They just as soon retreat to another place. It's like any other combatant. You don't really want to get into a fight unless you think you're going to win. You find rifles, you find ammunition, you find food, like rice, sometimes first aid kits. You know that it's a station where they can bring wounded people, take care of. But most surprising was I found this, looked like a car ignition coil. I don't know what that is. Mm-hmm. Okay. Mm-hmm. And a 12-volt battery. And it had a wire that came out, I think, on 2 sides. And it had a pencil, or maybe 2 pencils. I think it was 2 pencils. So I asked the Chihuahua, I said, what is this? He says, and finally I figured out what it was. It was actually arcing the 20,000 volts that you can develop out of a coil, arcing it, because it would arc, but it wouldn't be a lot of amperage in there. So it would arc and heat up and solder things. And I thought, man, it looks like it works, but that's pretty ingenious for them to be able to, not have the equipment, but they make the equipment, and it works.
And the pencils were for what?
The carbon in them for arcing.
I mean, it had to be terrifying.
There was a lot of tension. I mean, it was so much tension that you could almost snap at something. You know what I'm saying? You could see a hole or something and just start firing. You know, just because that was how tight you were.
Yeah, yeah.
You were so tight. I'm getting a little thinking about it, but.
Do you mind? I mean, just describe the feeling that you're talking about.
It's kind of a choking. It's like going somewhere I don't want to go. Now, you asked me about some experiences. One that I feel, you know, okay about. One was I was lowered into a tunnel. It was actually a well. It was a hole, and it looked like a well. So Peter Schultz was there, and they were lowering me into it. And I had my .45, and they were saying, more, you know, and they were talking to me. And as I'm dropping it, as they're dropping me, I'm talking to them. And then suddenly he said I stopped talking. So they, you know, yelled at me again, nothing. They pulled me out, and I was basically, suffocated. And I don't know.
You were unconscious?
I was unconscious, yeah. And they pumped me, and somebody said later, oh yeah, the infantry had thrown a grenade down there. It probably used up all the air. I don't know that that's true, because I've looked up, and it would be hard to displace air and not, you know, replace it. So I don't know how true it was, but whatever, I didn't, I passed out down there. And it's kind of one of those things that you expect, but it kind of shook me enough that I thought, well, what I had done was I dropped my pistol. And you never want to drop your firearm wherever you are, you know. And I said, put me back down. I'm going to go get it. And it's like, no, we're not putting you back down there. I said, I'll hold my breath, you know, but I want to go, you know. It was like an embarrassment that what a fuck up. And I don't know.
Gary Oatman arrived in Vietnam in the fall of '67 and was one of the earliest second lieutenants to lead the Diehard Tunnel Rats.
Somebody shot at me, I had no problem shooting back.
Sure.
I didn't normally take the first shot. I mean, I had to be sure they were the bad guys.
Yeah.
And I think it was something natural about it for me. I liked being a soldier, and I liked leading the men and bringing them home safe. And I took pride in doing a good job. We were always prepared because you were looking for anything. You know, we were over a quarter of a mile underground in this tunnel, and just hooked up some more wire to keep going another quarter of a mile. And I dropped somebody at each place where we came to a tunnel going in another direction. But we came to a T, so we had two directions. So I told Batten to go to the right, hold that position, and I was going to go around the left. And I no sooner started going left than they opened up on Batten with a semi-automatic, and probably not any further away than here to the corner over there. Pretty darn close. Bullets flying like crazy, a full automatic, AK-47, I assume. And he's firing back with his pistol. And we're both trying to back where we came from, and we're bumping our butts. And he's cussing at me to move out of the way, and I'm cussing him. Finally, I just quit and said, get on in there. And he got in there, and one of us had to give in. And then I got in. And I started firing mine because I was up front then. Then I reloaded, and he started firing his again. And I found inside, this is not going anywhere. They got us outgunned, and they know we're here, and they can see us, and we can't see them. We turned our lights out, but I really didn't want to turn them on because, you know, they just shot them out. So I said, all right, we're going to pull. And the guys that we dropped behind, they're in Panicville because they don't know what's going on up where we're at. You know, what is all that shooting?
But they can hear it.
Yeah, they can hear it. And so they're, you know, and a couple of them are fairly new, and I thought they're going to be really scared to death. So I passed the word back, keep, you know, call to them, call them by name, let them know you're coming out so they don't shoot you by mistake because they're probably panicky. So we're crawling out, and I was bringing up the rear. Sometimes I did stuff like that. We took turns. You know, I didn't like to have my men do anything I wouldn't do. So in that particular time, I decided I'd bring up the rear. And everybody got out, and they reached down to pull me out, and somebody yelled for a medic. And I had blood all over my head. I didn't know it. You know, I thought it was just sweat. And of course, you're just perspiring, soaking wet. We went out a whole lot faster than we went in. You know, we flew out of there. And so they took me over to the medics, and he wiped it off, poured some iodine, and it went down and got in my eye, and then I was really wanting to smack him. And he started tagging me for a Purple Heart, and somebody said, they want you on the radio. So I go get on the radio, and it's the Deputy Division Commander. And my call sign was Diehard 26, but I made my own up, Rat 6. And you know, I answered, this is Rat 6. And he said, I do not want you to go back in that tunnel. I told him what had happened. He said, blow it up. You know, put all the charges you can in, blow it up, but do not go back in that tunnel. And I'm, of course, you know, a little bit relieved, but I had already worked out my plan. But when the general said, do not go back in, I thought that's a good idea, you know, because I didn't know whether my idea would work or not. So we blew it up and everything we could. And then they had us go back out again the next day, and they brought bulldozers out and were trying to dig it up. Because
Same tunnel.
Same tunnel. When we went in, right as soon as we went in, we found a couple ammo boxes, and nobody wanted to open them because they could have been booby trapped. And so I sent everybody back, you know. And I looked at one of the guys. I said, "You want to open it?" And I said, "Whose turn is it?" And they all said, "It's your turn." So I look all over it, you know, and I told everybody to get away. And, you know, it's either going to kill you or it's not. You know, I don't know. Something about, I was crazy, I guess. And I lifted that little lever up in the side, and nothing happened. And I pulled that little lid up, you know, real slow, and there nothing happened. And it was full of paperwork, you know, just Vietnamese. And I closed it up and opened the other one up, and the same thing. So they took it and sent it to the G2, and it turned out to be a whole lot of identifying all the local VC that, you know, were acting like they were good guys. Mm-hmm. And apparently it was pretty good information. They got real excited, so they wanted to come back the next day and dig up what we blew up.
Hap Culp took over the leadership of the Diehard Tunnel Rats at the end of Gary Oatman's tour.
As far as the VC, I never had any of them shoot at me, but you know, that you knew they were in there. Like that one guy that threw the grenade at us, he was there, but he had gotten out because he knew we were going to come in at him. But I mean, he'd thrown a grenade. And somehow or other he got by the infantry. I don't know how he did it, and then I'd gone into some others that you knew that they were there.
This story doesn't take place in the tunnels, although he spent as much time in them as anyone. But I think it's an important reminder that these guys were combat engineers all of the time, in and out of the tunnels. Whether they were clearing a road, destroying a bridge, building a tower, or just moving from one place to another, they had to be ready to fight.
We used to be sent out to do recon work, too, besides the tunnel rats. And 13 days before I came home from Vietnam, they called me up and they said, Hap, we need you and some of your crew to go out. It was raining real hard and the roads were being flooded, and we need you to go out and check the roads and make sure we can run the convoys. So I start out, and there's 3 of us that were going to go, and there was a 4th guy.
Spec 4 Michael Klein was a clerk typist with the 1st Engineering Battalion.
And he needed to go visit his family in Hawaii for R&R. He was going to meet them there, but he couldn't get a flight out because the helicopters couldn't fly. It was raining that bad. And he said, hey, Hap, can I go with you? He was our clerk typist is what he was. A really nice young kid, 19, nice young kid. And I said, well, yeah, if you want to, Mike, I can give you a ride down to Zion. We're going all the way down there. Well, we get right outside of the base. We stop. I get out of the truck, start to walk down the highway. I look back at him, and he said, I can come with you, and I'll help you measure where the road's being flooded. And I said, well, Mike, you don't have to. He goes, oh, no, I'll be glad to. I'll have. So I get out. I start to walk away. I look back, and I look at Mike. He's smiling at me and happy, and boom, he disappears. And I get blown down the highway, and all I can remember is everything went black. I started going in like slow motion, being blown down the highway. You can see I don't know how long I laid on the highway, but I got up, pulled out my pistol, and of course, that's useless. I go back, there's a medevac comes in, they pick up the 2 other guys, and they say, Hap, you come on. And I went, no, I'm not going. I have to find Klein. And I go out into the rice paddy looking for Klein, expecting to find his body. I don't find his body. I find 2 legs and the spinal cord. I pull that back to the road, and some Jeep pulls up. I have no idea who they were or anything like that. And I'd leaned over, and I was holding my head, and he goes, are you getting sick? And I said, no, I'm not getting sick. I've seen plenty of this stuff, but my head hurts. They take me back to the aid station. I've had an eardrum blown out and this and that. And it was just like more emotions gone, just gone. And it's like, well, I can't, I don't deal emotions anymore. They're gone. But, the thing that would get to you, you'd have these in the eyes, because they're still open, and they look at you. But there's no life to them. And the eyes would get to you. That's what would really get to you. Somebody asked me about hunting one time, and I said, no, I don't hunt. I don't like the eyes. There towards the end, I just shut down. And I think Batten was pretty much the same. You're going to make me cry, and I don't cry.
Have you been to the wall?
Yes, once.
When you went there, was there anybody in particular whose name you...
Mike Klein's. And the strange thing about that one is I went there, and the book, it was open to the page where Mike Klein's name was.
That is weird.
Yeah. Whatever you want to draw from that, I don't know, but it was open to that page.
No kidding.
Yeah.
Michael Kenneth Klein was killed in action on October 20th, 1968, just 5 weeks shy of his 22nd birthday. He's memorialized on the wall at panel 40 West, line 7. According to the book The Tunnels of Cu Chi, Sergeant Robert Batten was assigned to the Tunnel Rats from the very beginning and volunteered for 2 extra tours of duty, staying in Vietnam for 3 years. The Viet Cong kept a list of their 10 most wanted American service members. Most of them were generals. Batman was the only enlisted man on that list. According to the website of AmVets Post 35 in Crestview, Florida, Robert Bob the Batman Batten passed away in 2003. I'll close with another excerpt from the book, The Tunnels of Cu Chi. With artillery and airstrikes using high explosives, chemical defoliants, and CS gas, the Americans pounded the surface, while below, whole battalions of regional and regular communist troops waited patiently. It was an extraordinary triumph of the primitive in a decade that saw man walking on the moon. We'll be back in 2 weeks with more stories of service, sacrifice, and healing. We'll see you then.